I want to do another weather video, but the weather really sucks. This is really awful weather for mid-September in the Great Lakes. So I'm going to talk about climate. And if you don't know what climate is, you can pause the Wikipedia page here. And if you do know, there's a small chance you're going to be one of those people who are like, Brendan, your weather videos are about weather, not climate. How on earth could a single weather event that brings rare birds, like a Category 5 hurricane, be in any way related to climate? And I will say, well, you know what? It's really hard to tie a single weather event to alterations in our climate, but you can say that over time, changes to the climate will mean that weather events will be slightly different, whether they're bigger or smaller or drier or windier or whatever. So the question is, why am I making this weather video on climate? And one of the big things I want to talk about is how changes to our climate over a fairly short-term scale, like 6 to 8 months, can affect things like where the jet stream goes, which ties into interesting weather in our area. It kind of steers the atmosphere. And I'm going to talk about the most famous of all sort of climate alteration events, which is the ENSO, or more commonly known as either El Nino or La Nina events. So off the north sort of west coast of South America, if this part of the ocean is warmer than average, it's an El Nino. If it's colder than average, it's a La Nina event. They measure sort of 4 parts of the ocean. This is the current thing, so you can see we're in sort of a warm, borderline El Nino state for a period of time. But things are getting cool in a hurry. Models weren't really picking up on this. But surprise, it's dropping fast, and now things are pointing towards the possibility of a La Nina event this winter. So there is an official La Nina watch in place. So what does this mean if you're a Great Lakes area birder? I found this online. It does a really great job of indicating, the typical January-March weather anomalies or the pattern in each of these events. So if it's warm, like it has been, you get this persistent Pacific jet stream, which brings stormy weather and fast-moving weather systems to the southern United States. The polar jet stream tends to stay north of the Great Lakes, and you get stuck in this kind of warm, kind of dry, really awful, boring patch, kind of like we are right now, because the atmosphere is sort of acting like there's still a bit of a La Nina effect in place. But if we're lucky and a La Nina event happens, and the atmosphere responds to this pattern, you tend to get a much more variable jet stream pattern. So the Pacific jet isn't necessarily as strong and kind of comes and goes. The polar jet branches north of this high pressure, and sometimes you get sort of phasing events in this part of the world. So you have warmer than average air south of the Great Lakes and cooler than average air to the northwest. And what essentially that would result in is an increase in either intensity or frequency of these big phasing of the jet stream, stormy weather patterns over the Great Lakes. This is when I do a blog post and say, oh my God, the weather looks amazing. Go out and find rare birds. So if that's the case, obviously it'll take a while for the atmosphere to respond, and not a whole lot is migrating in January, but the dream is for this to hold on into spring migration of next year in particular. So this is back to 2005 and sort of the monthly states. And if you look at March, April, May, or April, May, June averages, some of my personal best springs of birding in the southern Great Lakes, 2008, 2009, sort of 11, 12, 13, 14, tend to be in more sort of cooler states, sometimes coming off of these blue La Nina events. And I can definitively say 2 of my sort of most boring or uneventful Mays of migration in recent years have been 2010 and 2016, which have been sort of anomalously warm. So this might be a really exciting thing in the long term, just because the weather is so freaking boring right now. I wanted to talk about a bright light on the horizon. It is important to consider that there are other events that can happen, such as changes in the Arctic Oscillation, which could throw all this off. The ENSO region is pretty far south from the Great Lakes, so inevitably something like the Arctic Oscillation, which is much closer to home, if it were to ramp up or something anomalous were to happen, that could really change things in our area. Probably one of the most significant ones, based on my preliminary, basic, whatever you want to call it, research, is the North Atlantic Oscillation. When the North Atlantic Oscillation really ramps up, the birding tends to be spectacular in the northeastern part of the continent. But I've been told to keep these weather videos or climate videos short, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. Just focus on ENSO, possible La Nina coming. I really hope that means we're going to have a spectacular birding throughout the spring next year. Stay tuned. The next weather event's going to happen soon anyways, and this boring weather will change. Yeah!